So I would just like to say thank you very much for the council for allowing me to do this. If any of the council members are on, we're all about retaining and recruiting our people and making sure you have everything that you need so that you can be successful wherever you are in your career. So that being said, we have the illustrious, amazing, magnificent Vice Admiral Raquel Bono in the house tonight. So thank you so much, Vice Admiral Bono, for being. She's retired, but you know she always gets her. She's gonna always get her titles in here. So Dr. Bono, thank you so much for coming on. And I just want to take a time. There's something that we do when we start any meeting. We take 30 seconds to do what we call box breathing. And box breathing is when at different levels, you take a deep breath in, 5 seconds, you hold it at that level for 5 seconds, you breathe out for 5 seconds, and then you also rest at that level for 5 seconds. So if you don't mind, do a little box breathing with us. We're going to get started so we can all be centered in this place because I know people are driving, walking, whatever you're doing, but I want you to take that time. So 30 seconds if you don't mind. All right. And when you want to come back to center, we are ready to have you. So thank you everybody for putting in the chat where you're coming in from. We really appreciate it. Tonight, our focus is connecting across generations of leaders to learn how we can mentor, retain, and empower our medical force and our colleagues while navigating transition and change. The title is Commanding Wisdom, Readiness, Retention, and Resilience. I'm Dr. Kelly OMD. I'm a board certified OBGYN as well as a healthcare executive. And I was in the Navy for 26 years, retired a year and a half ago. And Dr. Bono, back then, Admiral Bono, she was introduced to me from Admiral Nathan. And he said to me, call Rocky. And I'm like, who is this? And who am I supposed to be calling? From my understanding, this is an Admiral and that I do not know her by her first name. So he called ahead and then I called like he told me to. And when I called her, I was nervous, shaking in my boots, but she said yes to the call. So Vice Admiral retired Raquel Bono is a surgeon, board certified trauma surgeon, and accomplished healthcare executive who served nearly 3 decades in the United States Navy, culminating as the director of Defense Health Agency, where she led a 50 billion, and I did say with a B, dollar global medical enterprise. Global. So when people are like, I'm a global, yes, she is global. Following her military service, she directed Washington State's COVID-19 health system response and served as chief health officer for Viking Cruises. She guided the company's safe return to sailing during the global pandemic. She is now CEO of Medical Eyesight, a pioneering 3D navigational imaging company advancing minimally invasive interventions. Dr. Bono also serves on several national boards, and I have questions about that myself, including Humana, the National Military Family Association, and the Henry M. Jackson Foundation for the Advancement of Military Medicine. Admiral Bono, it's wonderful to reconnect, but before we dive in to leadership and readiness, can you share a little bit about yourself now and your origin story?
Okay. Well, you already gave Kelly, thank you very much. You already gave a little bit of my official bio, but since leaving the military, I left right as COVID was starting to come on the scene. And so my husband bet me that he did not think I could stay retired for 6 months. And I was desperate to prove him wrong. So I kind of hedged my bet. I told him, okay, well, we're going to go traveling for a month. So we spent a month in Europe. And then I came back, and then I had to pack up all my uniforms and send them to my niece who was still in the Navy. And I got, I put all my memorabilia and all my love me stuff from my walls in my office, and I put them away. And I only got to about 5.5 months. I thought, what can I do to win this bet? And that's when the call came from Washington State, and I actually got a call from a colleague who asked me if I knew anybody that was retired and would be able to help with what was now called the pandemic by WHO. So I started going over the people that I knew that had just recently retired, and they said, "Well, no, let me rephrase the question. Would you be willing? Would you be willing?" And I share this story because the second person who called me actually ended up being Governor Inslee. And I said, well, I don't know what I could do to help you. And he says, well, I need somebody with deep healthcare knowledge. And I thought, sure, I could do that. Yeah, yeah, run a couple hospitals, did the DHA. I think I can do that. He says, and I think I need he goes, I need somebody who's done crisis management. And I thought, check, I could do that, trauma surgeon, took the commands through Katrina and Rita and, unannounced JACO expense. And I thought, sure, this is me. And he says, and I need somebody with leadership, and you're in the military and you know how to give orders. And I said, well, sir, actually, that's not what leadership is. But if you're willing to give me a chance, and I share that story because the job that I took with Viking, as you mentioned, Kelly,
Mhm.
also said the same thing to me. They said they needed me for my leadership, and because I was military, I knew how to give orders. And I said, well, that's not exactly how it works. Fast forward to today, I'm doing a lot of work with startups. I'm having a blast. Um, I'm so excited that you guys are continuing to have the conversation, and I want to be able to help and contribute in whatever way is appropriate or, as needed or as interested in, because I think that you guys are an incredible, the where you are in the spectrum of what's happening in healthcare and what's happening in the military and in the government is a crucial crossroads. And I think first off, I'm extremely proud of all of you for being where you are, for when you serve, for how long you've served, and how you're continuing to serve. And I think that's so important right now. So I'm thrilled to still be a part of the conversation in some small way. And I want all
And,
of you to
and it's
carry it
bigger than
forward.
small. Yes, absolutely. And it's bigger than small because the fact that you're still like, I'm here to serve. I am still here to serve. That's what is so important. And that's what is instilled in us as we join the military and
Yeah.
as we traverse and navigate the military. Even when you get out, you're still going to be thinking about how can I serve? And I love what you said that leadership is not giving orders because a lot of people think
Mhm.
it is giving orders.
Yeah.
The higher you rise, it is a lot of it is an influence, being an
Yeah.
influencer. So can you just expound upon that?
Yeah. So, one of the I was always said this, the one of the benefits, one of the many benefits of being in the military and being in a surgical specialty is that you see a lot of really bad examples of leadership, and you sit there and you go, at least for me, I'd go, ooh, that didn't work out well. I'm never going to do that if it ever comes, my time, if I ever get a chance to do that. But I also saw some very exceptional leadership along the way, and I was just constantly amazed that there were certain people that could make things happen and make it seem like it was painless. And it was painless to them, and they didn't necessarily have to inflict pain on others to make something happen. And I was always so, you know, interested and enthralled with how they did it. So I took it upon myself to really study, what's going on when you talk about leadership. What is it you're trying to do? And at the end of the day, what it is it's how well you manage your relationship with yourself and how well you manage your relationship with others.
Mm.
And, over and over again, the times that, I was disappointed in myself for something that didn't go well, it usually ended up me not self regulating very well or me not recognizing when my buttons were getting pushed.
Yeah, I think that's
So,
so important. Self-aware, like you're saying, self-awareness. And
yeah,
I know we hear all the time, your people are your most important assets. And sometimes people don't understand how do I manage the relation. I like how you said the relationship. I'm not managing people. Managing our relationship and our
yeah,
understanding. So that is, crucial. Now, one of the things you also, mentioned, we know we've gone through, the ranks of leadership, not just inside the organization, but as you retired as well. But health is our wealth.
yeah.
And one of the things I love asking people while you were in, as well as once you've retired, how are you staying healthy and living your healthiest and wealthiest life?
Yeah. This is a great question, and I've learned not to take it for granted. But being in the military, I put a premium on being the role model. I mean, it started out being the role model, but it made a difference when I couldn't, when I couldn't work out. So that habit that I had of always being ready for my PRT, and not trying to do it a month before before the actual PRT, but actually doing it all year long in some form, the cardio and the strength and, the core work. And I've carried that beyond the military. And it's a great, I've added some things. So I've added like yoga now and Pilates and now I actually give myself these goals of, hiking a certain amount and but that physical fitness, that paying attention to diet and exercise and now sleep, especially because I didn't get a lot of sleep when I was in my training as a surgery resident or as an attending. And sometimes, with all the travel I was doing in my military career, sleep was something that was kind of hard to get on a regular basis. So I'm paying attention to all of that. And, it sounds trite and it sounds like, that we should all know this, but between all the multiple jobs that each of you have and being with family and taking care of parents and your children, sometimes those things are the first to go. But I think that one thing I have learned since leaving the military is continuing to put that as a priority in my day, is getting a workout in of some kind.
And I think that's so important. That's one of the things we talk about, to make sure. And I meditate, journal, I exercise, and then optimizing, like you said, that nutrition,
Yeah.
hormones now. For me, hormones, right?
Yeah,
And our
yeah.
sleep.
Yep, I'm
So
telling
important at
you.
this time.
Yep. So, you know, and we need to do more work on that as we go through these transitions. You need to do whatever it is that keeps you at the top of your game. Because nobody's going around asking you, "Hey, what do you need today? What can I do for you to keep you at your top of your game?" So, be a little selfish when you're taking care of yourself.
Yeah, I know that is so important because in order to be the best leader that you can be, in order to be the best colleague or collaborator that we can be, these partnerships are so important right now. Taking care of yourself is a big thing. And I know people are like, oh, how do you do that when you're working, 30 hours and have all these priorities? Well, you have to prioritize yourself. But I'm not going to stay on that because that's another conversation.
Well, you know what? Let me just say on that though, because it is tough. I recognize it. And there have been times when I was in uniform and when I was out of uniform, where I would realize, oh, this is a confrontation. Oh, there's some kind of conflict here, and I remember, or what I've done in the past is, right in the midst of that, as we're locked in, and I'm like receiving the barrage, I'm saying to myself, okay, take a breath. I'm asking for help and let me get through this. And it is okay to do that. You know, just give yourself that grace as you're going through that experience. Because it's y- you know, that's that part of being able to rely on yourself in that moment. And you're going to need that, especially when there's so much ambiguity and churn and transition that's going on in all parts of the organization right now, in healthcare, in society, in families, in our military. So, try to create that space for yourself so you can find and be that center for yourself.
Yes, because we know what we want to make sure that we are not just reacting, but we're responding appropriately. And when your cup
Absolutely.
is not full, you don't respond appropriately. You react in the moment and
Yeah.
based on emotions many times. So we just
Yeah.
definitely want to do that. So I want to just transition into a question, one of those fun questions. As you look back on your life, your experiences, what achievement are you most proud of?
I can't pick just one because, like I told you, the TNTC, too numerous to count. I think out of all the titles that I love, the one that I love the most is mom. Truly. And most of my aides, every one of my aides actually, that helped me as I got into the senior ranks, they knew if they were holding my phone, if they saw any of my family members call, they knew to give me the phone, and I'd pull myself out of the meeting. Just because I know they wouldn't call me for nothing, except that every now and then, and I say that recognizing that there are times when it might not be a life or death, but it is important. I want to share the time that my oldest daughter called me. I was in the middle of a meeting. This was when I was Bethesda, and she's in grade school. And she goes, Mom, she goes, I got a call back. And she had tried out for a play. And so the principal had allowed her to call me in the office. And I picked it up right away because I thought, oh my gosh, I recognize the number. And so she goes, Mom, I got a call back. I said, honey, that's great. And people are sitting around me and they're like, wondering what's going on. And my daughter goes, Mom, what's a call back? But you know what? I would not have missed that. Call for anything. So it's one of those things where, you know, family is always important for me. That's how I identified that's what defined me, was the relationship I had with my family. And so I loved that. I'm proud of that. I'm proud of how brought my daughters. I have three grown daughters now, they're all adults, into my every hard task that was given to me, even when I felt like I didn't feel very popular at the time. Um, but I'm proud of being able to stand in a lot of uncomfortable places and still weather it and move through and still make meaningful change happen. And, so I would say don't limit yourself to one thing that you're proud of, because I think there's so many things that you should hold, in awe of yourself, just for even getting to where you are right now. So don't limit yourself to one. Be proud of a lot of things. you know,
And
from
give that proud moment the space to pause
Yeah,
and be proud for those small wins or big wins, because many
yeah,
times we're just moving on to the next thing, and
yeah,
we're not allowing that to take up any space, and we're not taking up any space, because if it wasn't for seeing you and some other people, being the boss at being in their positions, right? Not just being the boss, but like, I mean, like being the boss in their position, being the leader in their family, being all those roles, then many of us wouldn't have thought that we could do that too. I remember myself,
yeah.
I was like, oh, I can't have kids because I want to do this, this, and this. And I'm like, oh, wait, she got three kids and she's a surgeon. Let's do this. We can do this now. Right?
I know, I know. Don't constrain yourself,
Don't
guys.
you?
Don't.
And whether your kids are, human being children, furry babies, or you're the niece, your nieces, nephews,
Yeah,
whoever it is that take on that. And then, of course, like you said, when your family members are beginning to get older and you're becoming that sandwich generation and you're taking care of
yeah,
them, that makes a huge difference as well. So, that being said, having all these titles and roles, how can we help emerging leaders or leaders that are actually in their position right now stay mission focused on delivering that world class care, and especially in this operational environment that seems to
yeah,
be speeding up?
yeah. I think it's extremely challenging, and there's no doubt. And it's always been challenging. For those of you that have spent any time in the military, in military health, we've always talked about readiness, and it's kind of like we know readiness when we see it, but it's sometimes very difficult to describe as well as quantitate. And so I think the important thing is for yourself, is understanding, what does readiness feel like for you? And for me, readiness meant a lot of different things, but the thing that I would always remember about readiness was times I was deployed and being there when somebody needed me, and times that I was taking care or sending people downrange because it was our turn in the barrel, and being able to take care of their family members back home. And, no matter what was going on above me or around me, was I doing that in the way that was the right way, that honored the service that the family and the military member was providing? And was I doing it in a way that gave them the best care possible?
Mm.
And then, if things were hard, if someone would tell me why something couldn't happen, I always ask for, well, if I'm trying to do this, what would we need to look like, um, if I wanted to take care of the active duty member and be able to take care of the family member? And then I came to add and take care of the veteran,
Mm.
because all of that is what defined for me military health and readiness. And if I could keep coming back to that and I could remind others that that's what I was trying to do, I mean, we would still have conflict and we'd still have challenges and we'd still have to try and figure out how to prioritize things. But if I could just keep that, in the front and center of what I was trying to do professionally, and then, of course, for me, as I've already shared, my family was always a big part of that. So I always said that work-life balance was a myth. It's more a sliding scale, you know.
I hadn't heard the sliding scale, but I like that.
Yeah, it's a sliding scale. Sometimes you can do a lot, to the family balance, and sometimes you can't do as much. And sometimes you need to do more in the work balance. And I just saw something about advocacy being challenging right now. And of course it is, but it's always been challenging, you know. It's always been challenging because each of you, distinguish yourselves in ways that are unique. And when you are unique and you're a little out of the ordinary, then it's easy to point that out as a discrepancy rather than a gift. So, I would say that advocacy now, yes, it's challenging, but it's always been challenging. And that's why I think I can't stress how important it is that, like Kelly did for the beginning of this, is finding your center, being centered, and knowing that that's what that's what's going to give you the greatest decision space that we really need right now.
Yes, and
You know?
I love that statement, and I love what you said about the advocacy piece because if we look back in history, people have been advocating for many things, you
Yeah,
know, for the probably the entirety of the creation of this earth. It's just that we're experiencing it now for ourselves, so we're seeing it a little bit different. But we all have to know that yes, we do have the knowledge, the skills, the abilities, the talents, the gifts. We are uniquely and wonderfully made,
yeah,
and therefore we're going to be able to bring the advocacy piece to light in a slightly different way. And that is
yeah,
okay because there are many people that can stand with you, beside you, in front of you, or behind you in order to move that. And you're going to make a difference in many people's lives more than you actually know. So thank you so much for that statement as well as answering that as well. So thinking about that, and I do agree that when you have a mission and everybody is on like that same mission, especially in healthcare,
mhm,
right? We are trying to
yeah,
keep people healthy and well, whoever you are. When you walk through the
right.
door, before you get through the door, we are trying to keep you healthy and well. And then if you come through with something that we can help you with, then we're
Hmm.
trying to get you back to who you want to be.
Yeah.
So I think that, another big thing. So we're going to move on to the second part of decision making and accountability because we all need our accountability partners, right?
Yeah.
Have you ever had a challenge, like had to challenge a supervisor or a leader, somebody above you, decision or defend your own to somebody that worked for you? And then how did you navigate that?
Yeah. So I don't know if there's a statute of limitations on some of the stories that I share with you guys, but I'm just going to go ahead and go for it. And, and so, I was running a hospital down in Florida, a while back. It was a long time ago. And we'd had a lot of challenges, and this is me challenging BUMED. So I'll just be upfront about what it was and what happened here. Um, we had had a lot of challenges when I got to Jacksonville, and I'll tell you the name of the hospital too. It's a wonderful hospital, one of my best tours. Loved it. People there, nothing against them at all. But I arrived at a time when there was a lot of attention being paid to some cases that had a bad outcome, and so the hospital itself was subjected just about every other month to another lawsuit. And it was a lot because I realized how demoralized the staff were. I realized how uncertain and anxious and scared our patients were. And I was also very quickly finding out how much attention this could generate with Congress, with BUMED, with the CNO's office. And I thought, wow, I guess this is kind of a big thing. Um, but at the time then too, it was also at the time when we were doing deployments every 6 months to Gitmo and taking care of the detainees there. we were also starting to do the rotations with Iraq and Afghanistan. So we were having a lot of people moving in and out, and it was just really, really tough. And one of the things that I had put a premium on was not only taking care of the staff, taking care of our patients, but also being the model for what we needed to do to always be prepared. And so, and I'd also realized that my enlisted um, crew had felt that previous leadership had kind of given passes to the officers and held the enlisted to a slightly different standard. And so when I met some of my senior enlisted, they were all on the fence about whether or not they could throw their weight in behind me. And they wanted to see who this Rocky Bono was and whether or not she was, really going to rise to the occasion. And so um, I was in the process of changing having a new XO come in. And I knew this individual, had worked with them before, loved their leadership style, loved their perspective, had felt very comfortable with with this assignment that was coming on. And I'd already gotten the call from BUMED saying, hey, we're going to send so and so there to be your XO. Any problems with that? And I said, no, great. I enjoy working with this individual. And by this time too, we were like well into about a year and a half. And I was doing PT with the hospital every Friday. We'd run by the base CO and we'd make a lot of noise. And we were really making a very visible statement of what readiness looked like physically in our physical fitness. So my new XO shows up, and the first thing I hear from before they've even walked into my office is they are not within weight standards.
Mhm.
And I said, well, and I mean, literally, people came into my office and said, Skipper, you're not going to believe this, but we've got a weight standard problem. And say what you will, and this is not any kind of body shaming. It was a condition of employment, and it was a condition for us I mean, I had some of our people returned from deployment because they were in a joint command, and the Army sent them back because they didn't meet weight standards. I thought, okay, that's not going to ever happen again to this hospital, to our command. So I called up UMed and I said, what are my options? And I said, I've worked so hard. People are now paying attention. My command has worked so hard to be at, and so UMed said, you can select another XO. And I said, well, let me work with this person first and see if there's another solution, ranging from giving them time to get within weight standards and then bringing them back officially, and or finding another XO. So this individual, and I said, this is not against you personally, but this is our command and this is what we're up against. So they opted to leave the command, and then we found another XO. Um, and I thought that was it. There were so many repercussions. And here's what floored me. Um, there were some very angry people that were very visibly angry at me. And I thought, okay, well, um, I think I've got my 20 years. I think I can now retire and, and I'll have a pension. So that's the good news, and I thought, well, the bad news is, I mean, the good news was I also remain friends with this individual. But the bad news was, I thought I've broken one of the unspoken rules. I called and I had called out inadvertently the people who had sent this XO to me and had publicly doubted, you know, them sending this XO to me. What I didn't know was the number of people who had silently thought, finally, someone has stood up and called it out.
Right.
But I can remember feeling extremely nervous and very scared because, I ended up staying at Jacksonville for about for a little bit longer. I mean, we needed the continuity, but I was petrified what my next job might look like and whether or not I had any kind of longevity in the Navy.
And I think that's such a powerful story to say. First of all, you had a difficult conversation with a colleague, future staff member, somebody that you're going to work with. And we know that, the XOCO CMC is supposed to be like this triad.
Yeah,
And whatever happens behind closed doors, nobody knows about. But when you go out in the public scene, then you all come together as a team. But then it also sounds like you stood in your values as well as the values of the organization that you were in. So I'm glad to hear you can say, I was scared. I was scared
oh,
about
I
what was
was
going to happen because
petrified. I was
I thought I was going to
petrified.
do the right thing. And there's so
Yeah,
many instances that come up for each one of us that it's like, I thought I was doing the right thing that aligned with the mission, vision, goals, and values that everybody's teaching me. But the fact that you stood up and stood in your authentic self and being willing to help somebody that needed help, but they made the choice, right?
yeah, yeah.
And
Yeah, and that was the important thing. And and I told you too, my senior enlisted, you know, they had been withholding any kind of support from me. I mean, not anything in a negative way. It's just they were waiting to see which way you know, and I can tell you to this day, they are probably one of my most fiercest, advocates and supporters because I mean, I think that, and I'll tell you, I mean, this was one of those moments where, we talked about it. We always talked about what we were supposed to do to be mission ready, and 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 I took it on, and I, um, so yeah, I ended up staying a little bit longer than that, so that they didn't, they didn't kick me out just yet. So
No, I mean, I think that's really important because also that was going to be one of my next questions. How do you build consensus, especially keeping teams together? So that's teaming,
yeah,
that's team organization, that's team confidence and trust. How did you, so if you could just kind of go through that and say, you know what, these are the principles that you can take away about building team consensus, and coming together as a team.
yeah. One of the things that I realized is you everyone wants to be heard, right? And everyone deserves to have a voice, even when you don't agree with what they might be saying. And um, I don't know if it was anyway. I think most people, when they started working with me, recognized that I was okay with hearing dissenting views, and oftentimes I'd encourage it, or specifically, you know, solicit that because I felt it was important to hear all different sides. But I also learned that sometimes the people who are the ones that are complaining the most or are most vocal, not necessarily complaining, they're most vocal about what you're doing, were the ones that I should listen to the most. And so, I would, whenever we would try to make change happen or undertake change, the people that had some of the strongest reactions or comments to make about what we were working on, I would spend time with them one on one to make sure I heard them. And it's true what they say, in order to be heard, you have to listen first. You have to hear others first. And here's what the fascinating thing I found is that some of those folks that were the most vocal, when I spent that one-on-one time and I truly tried to understand where they were coming from, I might not necessarily change the decision that had to be made, but now they felt heard, and they knew that I wasn't doing something that was trying to mess things up for them or to deliberately provoke them. And what was interesting that was the number of times that they became some of my most ardent advocates for the change. They became some of my, my cheerleaders, or they were the ones that helped lead the change in many times, because sometimes the people that are the loudest also have their own following. And if you're not aware of how they influence other people's behavior, and you're not able to accommodate that in the change, and you can't accommodate that into building the consensus that you're trying to create, then you're going to lose an opportunity to really generate a lot of momentum.
Oh, that I love that you just said that because we don't know who's behind everybody else, right? Everybody has a network of people. And
Yeah.
many times people that have concerns definitely have valid concerns, and taking that time to listen makes such a huge difference that they're like, you know what? I think I can trust this person because at least they took the time to hear what I had to say. And
Yeah.
many times once you hear what they have to say, you may not change that specific instance that you're dealing with at that time, but it could be
Hmm.
something down the road to say, you know what, I remember such and such brought that up. Maybe I'll look into that a little bit more and consider that in my decision making the next time.
Yeah.
And so that's why listening tours are so important. There's something that we do called executive office hours, where you can't talk to everybody, but if you can get a few people in the room and you just hear what's going on, you're like, oh, okay, that sounds good,
Yeah.
and you all are on the same page and you're hearing each other. It makes such a huge difference. So yeah, thank you for that, and sharing that story. I just think it's so important, and we can definitely use that. I look like we're going to say. All right. So the third thing we're talking about today is resilience. And I will be honest with you, if I heard one more person tell me that I needed to learn how to be more resilient, I was about to be like, the way I grew up. Let me tell you about the way I grew up, the origin story, right? There was nothing but resilience that had to be
Yeah.
developed. But these days and days, there's a different type of pivot that you got to make. So, what are your thoughts about resilience, and how do we move forward so that we can continue to be strong in what we do?
Yeah. No, a great question. So first thing I'm going to tell everybody is recognize your own resilience. I mean, you would not be here in this chat room now if you didn't. I just want to crash out. I know. I get it. But you know what? Here's something though that I want to say about the resilience is that it's already hardwired in all of you. Okay, you've already got it. And yes, every now and then you do have to take a break. Okay, because it is hard. And part of that resilience is the ability to bounce back. Okay. And and sometimes being resilient doesn't necessarily mean like, staying hanging in there until the bitter end. Sometimes what being resilient means is finding the way to be absolutely true to yourself,
Mhm.
and I said this a little bit earlier, is giving yourself grace. It's all of you I know are carrying, if not two FTEs of work, two and a half or 10 FTEs of work. And you're probably doing it because you know it needs to get done. And you're right. I'm part of the sandwich generation, taking care of my elderly parents. My girls are thankfully they're grown and out of the house. I tell them, okay, I'm role modeling what you're going to need to do for me now when my time comes. Um, but I would say too, and this is what I really enjoyed when we started doing these sessions with the female physicians, the military female physicians. And I encouraged everybody to be networks for each other. It is so important. I didn't have that when I was growing up. I mean, when I was coming through the system. I think some of I was the first female to graduate from the Portsmouth residency program. I was the second female to start. And I'm not trying to make this about the isms, right? I'm just saying that because we're in medicine, because we're in the military, because we have been brought up to serve, it is going to be challenging. And, it is challenging for everybody, no matter who you are. And so, because we all have competing interests and competing priorities, but I just want you all to feel like you do have resilience that's inherent and organic to who you are. And you need to give yourself grace and credit for that. Um, you need to find ways to keep it and keep it healthy because it does take a beating. And um, I'll tell you just real quickly the time that I was finishing up a case and I was not doing anything right. couldn't hold the needle driver the right way, wasn't holding the scalpel the right way, didn't know my anatomy. I started doubting, why am I doing this? I don't even belong here. I shouldn't have done this. This is so embarrassing. I've got to find a way to get out of here. I don't know how I can leave the Navy. And the only thing I could think of was getting my patient into the recovery room and getting, someplace where I wouldn't run into people that would know me, because I knew I was right on the verge of bursting into tears. So I just got into the locker room, which I had to share with all the techs and the nurses, because there weren't very many of us that were surgeons, female surgeons. And I got into the first stall that I could find, and I burst into tears as soon as I got in there. And I thought, I'm just going to hide out here for a little bit and wait until it goes away. And then I'll get out, I'll sneak out. But I miscalculated because it was shift change for lunch. So I ended up staying in that stall for like an hour and a half, which is good because it made me realize that, and I'm not trying to be trite about this, and I'm not trying to be Pollyanna about it. The feelings were real. I was feeling bad about choosing to be a surgeon. I was feeling bad because I didn't think I could be a surgeon, and I didn't think I measured up. Um, and I remember thinking that it was all about me. It was all about me in that moment. But here's something that I realized, and I don't know if it's going to help others, but I hope it does. Anytime that there's a change that needs to be made and you're part of it, there are at least three elements that are trying to change, and not all three elements are going to be as conscious of the need for the change, or as knowledgeable about what they need to change. So the first thing was me. I was coming into a system that wasn't designed for me, and I didn't know how I was supposed to be in that system. So what did I need to do to adapt to become a part of that system? And then there was the people in the existing system. They said that they were doing this so they could bring on more people into this so that they could become a more forward-leaning, more relevant, topical surgical group or organization. But they didn't know what it meant to bring on somebody. I mean, they didn't, they weren't even aware of the structure of the system, and what the structure of the system, how that structure of the system needed to be changed in order to bring in people that had not been in that system before. And then finally, it's the third thing is, and what is the culture and the environment? What about that? And sometimes you're going to have to be the first one to change in order to make the rest of the other things change.
Hmm. Yeah,
Right?
look at what you started off with, that self-awareness. So I know we have about 15 minutes left, and I want people to start asking questions or putting in the chat the questions they have, because we want you to walk away with a win. We don't want you to come away from this conversation without at least one great nugget that makes you feel like, you know what, this hour was worth it, and I have my win coming out of this. But I already got my win. I'm like, I don't know about y'all, but I'm winning. This is winning right now for me. Um, but one of the that's just such an important thing, that know thyself, giving grace to thyself, making sure that you set boundaries for yourself. And I know people think, oh,
Yeah.
I can't set boundaries because I'm a owe this, or I'm enlisted this, or I'm, you know what I'm saying? All these levels. Everybody has trouble setting boundaries. But the thing is, you got to do it. Because like we
Mhm.
started out, your health is the most important asset of your
Yeah.
life. And if we don't have our health, whether it's spiritual, physical, financial, mental, and emotional, then we're not going to be able to do all these wonderful things. And understanding that, you know what, we all get scared sometimes. We all get frustrated. We all think that we may not be enough at sometimes. As long as you don't
Yeah.
live in that silo and you don't go deep into it, then your network can help pull you out and see, you know what, there's some greatness about me that I got to
Yeah.
keep going.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. But you know what? I'm going to tell you something though, too. I mean, it is okay to feel overwhelmed, and it is okay to feel discouraged.
Mhm.
I mean, it's legitimate. Just like you said, Kelly, you don't want to stay there though, and just, and I love what Tanya was saying, grace for me, grace for them, and grace for the environment. So true. So true. And it's just, it wasn't meant to be easy. And if it were, then anyone could do it. And you guys are not just anyone, right? So
Yeah. I mean, we think
Um,
about what do they say all the time? 6% of the population joins the military, right? So then you start talking about as you go through different levels, you become like the 4%, the 3%, the 1%, the point zero
yeah,
zero zero 1%. The people ain't never
right.
done it before. And it's like,
Yeah.
you know what? We have to understand that we haven't been in this space. I was just having this conversation. It's like we haven't been in this space before. We may not have seen it role modeled. So we're
Hmm.
creating what we want the
Yeah.
space to look like, not just for ourselves, but for future generations as well.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, let's see. As we've said, whew, there's so much, it's so rich. But what advice would you share with medical officers? So this is a big one because everybody's thinking, I said every 4 years I was making decisions.
Yeah. Me too.
But what would you tell people as they're making decisions? Do I stay? Do I stay in? Do I retire? Do I transition to a civilian practice? And whatever you're doing, whatever your job
Yeah.
title is, what?
Right. No, I went through the same drill every 4 years. I mean, and I was probably, I've been giving you true confessions all night, you guys. So one more, you know. So every 4 years, I sit there and I go, okay, I really want to up my wardrobe. I really want to have like matching shoes. I want to have a little more choice. I was very shallow about my decision, on what it was, what were the triggers um, for deciding to leave or not. But here's the thing, and what I went through, and it won't be for everybody, but here's what I went through is that I did recognize that medicine was changing and that, this is, and I'm dating myself, but, managed care was starting to come into the scene. I recognized that military health was one big managed care organization. So I thought the longer I stay in and learn this a little bit better, the more I'll be able to contribute once I get out and I work in that managed care environment. But I also came to realize as I was doing this that there was a certain part of me that shifted where I realized I no longer had to serve, but I was allowed to serve, that I got to serve when other people didn't. And that became something really important to me, especially as I started understanding the different ways of creating leadership, creating change, creating consensus, and helping to develop alignment and momentum for that change. And I realized I wouldn't get that kind of experience anywhere else. So for me, that became extremely important. Having said that, one of the things I have also found since getting out of the military is that no matter how long any of you decide to serve, you will have served. And that is impressive enough. No matter the length of time that you've been in uniform, you have served when so many other people were not able to, and you did. And I think that's important. The other thing that you also have to realize is that once you cross that line and go into the civilian world, you will continue to excel because all that you've learned in the military will serve you well once you go into the civilian world. So you will be well prepared for that transition. And then the final thing, and this was the part that resonated with me at the time and that I felt was so important, is that sometimes the change that needs to happen can only happen from within. So, you know, I felt compelled to try and change things for our patients in the military health system. And I knew that probably the most effective way that I could, given my skill sets and my portfolio, was from within. Having retired and I'm outside, I realize now there are some additional ways, but it doesn't have the same impact that I had when I was in within the system. So all of those things I think are what you're gonna have to balance. Um, but regardless of when you decide to take the uniform off, just remember that you've already served. It's incredible. Not everybody has done that, and that you will do well no matter where you land next. I can guarantee it. Oh, Kelly, you're muted.
Absolutely. They're confident in you, just like you said. You came out and people are like, we want you. And that is literally how it goes. People are like, we want you because we know that you have these skill sets and that you have leading at the highest level. And it doesn't mean that you're a old, 7, 8, or 9. It means that wherever you are, you understand. We talk about all the time, bloom where you're planted. And we learn how to do so many different things. And so, that is just a truly amazing thing. So I do want to ask a question. I don't see anybody with anything in the chat. We got about a couple minutes left. I did have a question about the new venture you're on. So the 3D imaging. Tell me
Yeah.
about that. And did I say the name right? I apologize
Yeah,
if I
no,
said
no, that was great. Yeah, yeah. So I kind of stumbled on this medical eyesight. Well, they asked me to help them. I helped them in terms of some of their surgical innovation. And then they ran into some challenges with working with some of the clinicians. And the people that were doing it were non-clinicians. So I thought, yeah, I can talk clinician. So I started working with the clinicians, and then I realized that what I'd seen as the DHA director when people were coming to me with really great ideas was that they would come to me with these great ideas and they all sounded great. And then I'd say, well, what does your data show? And they wouldn't have any data, or they wouldn't have like, a proof of concept that with proof and so then I realized that a lot of these startups that I started helping, they have great ideas, but they don't know how to go about proving that it's a great idea. So this medical eyesight, this 3D navigational imaging is really cool. So we're segmenting and registering different parts of radiographic images of different types: MR, CT, fluoroscopy. Fluoroscopy is the LADAD, but what we're doing is reconstructing into 3D images and using this in real-time navigation. So, I mean, I'm totally geeked out on the tech part now, because what we're doing, I talk in terms of latency and and how well the image tracks. And we've actually discovered, as we've been working through this, and I'm doing the grant is with the UK, the Imperial College in the UK, that we're bringing part of this to the US with a shared collaborative imaging, so that you can actually, across different end user devices, is look through a radiographic study in 3D or just in 2D DICOM imaging, and do it in such a way that I can show you exactly where I'm looking, so that the number of times when they would say, they would take me through the biliary tree and they go, well, it's this branch and this, and I'd have to try and remember my anatomy. Now we
right.
can actually point and say, this is what I'm looking at, this is what I'm talking about, but we can do this across multiple end user devices. So pretty exciting stuff. And it's totally different from, I mean, every job that I had in the Navy, in the military, or when I got into the joint spaces, was not exactly what I'd gone over in my residency and my fellowship. you know?
And like I said, I think that's what's so great about it. You talk about longevity. People are talking about longevity as just as far as living longer and healthier. But the
Yeah.
whole part of that is finding something that excites you, that makes you excited, happy, find purpose in what you're doing at every stage of life. And when people are asking the question, how do I know to stay in or get out? If I'm not finding that excitement in what I'm
Yeah.
doing, then I'm like, you know what? I've given my time. I've done my service. It's time for me to move
Yeah.
on and open space for the next person and be here to mentor that next person that's about to take up space
I love
that
that.
you were
Yeah.
aiming for. So that makes such a huge difference. So, Admiral Bono, I just want to say thank you for your
My
authenticity,
pleasure.
your wisdom, and your leadership. You've shown us that not just resilience is built on purpose, humility, and service, and that every career transition can become a bridge to even greater impact. And to everybody that's listening, please, please, please stay in touch. Come back. When we ask you to come back, please give us feedback. We're going to send you out a survey. Please give us some feedback and let us know what you need so that we can help mentor you during these times, advocate for you, and sponsor you. I mean, you just heard where we're all sitting and being at this time. That means there's opportunity wherever that we are. And we
Yeah.
can still pick up the phone and call a few friends too.
No, you guys are great. You're great for doing this. Keep it up, and be there for each other, please. You know, this is probably going to be your greatest strength. So hang in there. I believe in you. I know you're going to make this better. You're going to make this better for yourself, for those that follow you, wherever you are. So just I just believe in you guys, and thank you so much for letting me be a part of the conversation even now.
Wonderful. So stay mission ready, stay well, and remember self leadership begins with self introspection and self care and then service. So thank you all. We're going to stay on the line just for a little bit, but have a wonderful evening. Thanks for being with us tonight. Bye.
Thank you. Take care, y'all.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.